This bandsaw is now fully functional, so it's time to work on the enclosure. And I'm going to start by making the base more final. I kind of like these horizontal pieces on here, and I want to put these casters here. But I like the height that it's at, so I need to make these pieces a bit thicker to get the right height with those casters. I just glued those up. Now I need to plane them square. The limiting factor with wood screws like this is the head pulling through the wood, hence the washers. Before working on the blade guide guard, I'm just working out how the top enclosure is going to work. But then I decided to leave that until later. I'm cutting the material for the guard above the top blade guide out of some old radiator cover. Now I need to bend the channel out of this thing. The tricky part is this is a bit thicker than I need it to be, so it'll be really hard to bend. Not as sharp a bend as I would have liked, but it'll do. I used a block for banging it for the second bend, but that bend wasn't any sharper than the first one either. I hadn't used a guide for my angle grinder when I cut a piece out in the first place, so some of the cuts weren't entirely straight. So now using a piece of hardwood as a guide to straighten some of those cuts. The guard fits here, leaving room for the blade. It also has to fit around the wheel, so that as I move this up, the wheel is actually inside the guard. Then I have this idea for extra fancy detail to taper down the front of this guard a little bit for better visibility. But I had a hard time getting into that corner with the tin snips. Should have just started that cut with these tin snips. I cut this back a little bit so that this part overlaps, and now I just need to bend that over. There, didn't even need to weld that. Now I just gotta grind off that little protrusion. So I got a bit of clearance for the blade in here, and the guard fits around the wheel as it goes up. And that's kind of important because when I got the blade guide way up, that guard needs a place to go. The hinges for the cover will attach to this thing later. Now with this blade guide in place and this part and this temporarily here, I feel much safer using the saw because the blade couldn't come off in a way that it would hit me. Also, when I'm using the saw here, I'm used to reaching over here for the switch, and right where the other saw has got the switch, this one's got the blade, so this is very important. So now I'm finally ready to try a wider blade on this saw. And the blade came off and it went nowhere, just so you know. And it seems to have gotten stuck in this log. Bottom wheel kept turning from momentum. That caused it to come off on the bottom and on the top. Okay, more blade tension this time. Let's try again. Looking at this blade, the end of the teeth have got quite a sharp hook angle, which means they kind of pull themselves into the wood. I think that's what's causing a lot of this jumping. So for resawing this ironwood, 2/3 of a horsepower, not quite enough power. Works fine resawing this oak though, but definitely could use more power. And I could also use more of an enclosure because that dust is just ending up everywhere. So the next thing I want to do is investigate some of that banging when I'm resawing. Might have something to do with the blade. And then after that, I think I'll focus on the bottom cover instead of the top, because the bottom cover helps to contain the dust. But it's all very slow going because while I'm doing this, I'm also working on the plans for the saw. That's always a long slog, and I decided to start working on that before I'm done with the videos and the build, so that hopefully once the final build video is out, I'll have the plans ready too.